Sometimes when you play a bad game, you think, wow, what were they thinking? And while there are definitely some bad games that came from good ideas, sometimes the problem with a game is that it's anything but inspired. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 video game ideas that sucked. Starting off at number 10, Doom 4, which was Call of Duty, but with demons. Call of Doomy. Oh, I'm glad this one didn't happen. So after Doom 3 came out in 2004, the franchise went into a decade-long hibernation. Yeah, for good reason. If you go back and play Doom 3 now, there are some minor improvements that make it not the worst thing ever, but man, people did not like Doom 3 when it came out. And during that decade, the landscape of first-person shooters changed very quick. And because of that, when it was time to make a new game, id Software didn't really know how to evolve the series. Doom 2016's success eventually showed that there was still a demand for old-school shooters, but it wasn't a guarantee the game would have been well received. For years, the game was stuck in development hell, playing Follow the Leader to the Call of Duty franchise. And before they came to their senses and just canceled that whole version of the project, Doom 4 was going to be basically everything the fans feared. Instead of a fast-paced action game with large levels, it was a slow-moving cinematic experience with extremely linear levels. Now, it's set on Earth during a demon invasion, so that, at least, is Doom-like. Doomy, one might say. And what you would do is take on demons as well as possessed cultists, who basically would fill in for the standard FPS enemies. The pre-alpha footage doesn't look bad. I mean, as a completely different franchise that has completely different expectations than the Doom franchise, that could be alright. But the thing is, you just have to go fully in that direction. And obviously they want to retain some level of Doom's identity. So what it ended up looking like was something like Resistance, and to be frank, that's not Doom. If you're gonna make something that's not Doom, make it as something that isn't Doom. Start it as a new IP and build something unique. As an entry into the Doom franchise, you have to incorporate elements of Doom. And if you do that, you end up essentially watering down the whole formula either way. Either it's Doom or it's not Doom. It can't be kinda Doom. That's going to be bad for everybody. Like, people who want it not to be Doom are going to be mad because it's Doom-like. People who want it to be Doom are going to be mad because it's kind of Call of Duty-like. And let's just say Call of Doomy just sounds like some kind of New Coke type thing. I'm happy that they didn't make this version. And number 9 is Shadowrun from 2007. Is this the best way to revive a cult classic RPG? The SNES, and especially the Genesis versions of Shadowrun, are cult classic RPGs for a reason. They're dense, they're complicated, interesting, they have this fascinating cyberpunk world that has some fantasy elements, and by the year 2007, people were really wanting some kind of a follow-up. Bethesda had announced a Fallout follow-up for 2008. Maybe Shadowrun could get some next-gen love as well. Well, Shadowrun did get rebooted, but not in a way any of the original games or tabletop version would imply would make sense. Instead of being an RPG, you know, what Shadowrun was, either way, it was a squad-based FPS developed by FASA Studio. Fans of FASA, the developers of some of the best MechWarrior games and the great Crimson Skies sequel, did not want them to make something like this, and Shadowrun fans, well, let's just say they were in full agreement. It's the exact problem that I described with Doom in the last point, except the game came out. So the only people who would have ever been interested in this were multiplayer FPS players who had no interest in the IP at all, leading me to believe that it might have made sense to make this game and not call it Shadowrun, start a new IP, blah blah blah, what did I say in the last point, and just avoid the source material. Like, all it did was make everyone mad. There's a long list of IPs that have been inexplicably turned into multiplayer shooters. Like, does anybody remember Gotham City Imposters? It's the rights holder shoving a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't work. And number 8 is Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects, which I don't know what EA was smoking with this. Marvel superheroes pretty much remain some of the most well-known and beloved characters, period. That didn't stop for a while. Pretty much been going on and on. So EA and Nihilistic Software decided to make a fighting game where half the roster was a bunch of nobodies that you don't care about. So you can't play as the Hulk, but check these dorks out. You can play as Brigade, Johnny Ohm, and Fault Zone. I'm guessing Johnny Ohm has something to do with electricity, and Fault Zone probably something to do with earthquakes. Brigade? I don't know what Brigade... Like, there's nothing implied by that name. So it sounds like a fair trade, right? The whole thing's just a boneheaded idea. Like, it's hard to wrap my head around it. I mean, the idea of a Power Stone-like Marvel fighting game, that's great. Like, when you say that, though, a Power Stone-like Marvel fighting game, the assumption is that you would include Marvel heroes that people care about. Otherwise, why do it? So, making most of the cast just completely unknown, well, kind of dulls the allure of it a bit. The game was not that much fun to play either, so it fails in every possible way. I can't get over how lame these guys are. They're literally called the Imperfects. The title was wrong, too. They did not rise. They were in it, but rise they did not. At number 7 is Dwarfs, a dark and gritty retelling of Snow White. Obsidian, fantastic developer. Fallout New Vegas is beyond a classic. But this Dwarfs game they were working on that got canceled, I don't know about this one. You ever had a friend who's really proud of some idea they had and they just go on and on about how brilliant and how awesome it is and how cool it would be if it got made, and you're kind of sitting there afraid to tell them how stupid they sound? Yeah, that's Dwarfs. It's a game that Brian Mitsoda, the designer and writer for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodline, said, "I think if it had come out, it would be considered a classic today." Everyone who worked on the project seems to have positive things to say about it, but it's a dark retelling of Snow White and the friggin' Seven Dwarfs. It didn't get canceled because it was too good, you know? Reading about the whole project today sounds like a parody, not something we're supposed to take seriously at all. Like the prince kills his mother by mistake. In a shocking opening sequence, Dopey was mute because of the trauma of watching his mother die. You know Dopey, the cartoon character that looks like this? Dopey, the guy that seems like he's got half a banana for a brain. Yeah, he's dark and tortured, guys. He doesn't speak, not because he's dumb, but because he's emo. That's just a bad idea. Maybe Obsidian could have done something decent with it. And again, a lot of people seem to talk positively about it that worked on it. And maybe it would have been a classic. Maybe it would have subverted all of our expectations. But as a starting point, the idea is not good. And number 6 is Star Wars: The New Emperor, an FMV game starring everyone's favorite Star Wars character, C-3PO. Oh yeah, and no one else. This is a game we know almost nothing about other than a name and a basic premise, but that's really all it takes to earn a spot in this list because, yeah, what the hell were they thinking with this? Most of the canceled Star Wars games sounded like good ideas, like Battlefront 3 or Star Wars 1313, both of which were canceled for stupid reasons in my opinion, but whoever made the call to curb stomp this one, maybe that was the right choice. Well, not maybe. Everything about Star Wars: The New Emperor is kind of baffling. It seems to be an FMV game set after Return of the Jedi about the Imperial Remnant crowning a new emperor. Not Snoke. Also, Palpatine hasn't, returned. It's a new dude. Maybe it was going to be a grand reintroduction of Triclops, Emperor Palpatine's son with an extra eye in the back of his head, which is a real character from a Star Wars EU book, which I can't imagine why Disney made all of that stuff not canon. Not even that it was bad, it would just be impossible to work with, and they also don't seem to be quite as competent. So for whatever reason, whatever mission that the rebels were undertaking, they sent C-3PO, because who else would you send to do whatever they were going to do in response to crowning a new emperor? Why would you send one person? And it wasn't even supposed to come out in 1993. It was being developed in 1998. The Phantom Menace was about to come out. Everything about this just sounds so dumb. So dumb that I want to know more than I do. We only have a short description to go on, but it's such a weird and bad idea we had to talk about it. I just wish we could say more. And number 5 is Metroid Prime Federation Force, a Metroid game where you don't play as Samus. So this is another one that actually came out, kind of in the bad ideas that should have been canceled but weren't category. In 2016, Metroid Other M was looming, considered by most a failure. So basically they came up with a 3DS exclusive cooperative shooter where you don't play as Samus. So obviously that would rescue the whole thing, right? That's apparently what somebody thought. But yeah, instead of playing as the iconic hero of the series, you play as a faceless Federation grunt going on like random short missions that are just miserable unless you're playing with other people. One of those games where I guess it's playable with friends, but it might as well not be because playing by yourself is not fun. Also, the weird chibi art style doesn't make sense. Like, I've never seen a Metroid look like this. Why? The entire premise doesn't fit with the Metroid series in any way, and everything about it feels wrong. It's a Metroid game with almost no recognizable Metroid elements. There's no exploration-based gameplay, none of the iconic powers, and it's just like mindless shooting in these small, boring missions. There have been a couple of weird Metroid Prime spin-offs, like remember the pinball game? But those came out when Nintendo was still making Metroid games. Maybe if this came out now after Metroid Dread revitalized the whole thing, it wouldn't have been so reviled, but it's a sucky idea for a Metroid game either way. And number 4 is Duke Nukem Endangered Species, which is a Duke Nukem hunting game. In the early 2000s, the PC gaming market saw an absolute deluge of hunting games. The most popular were the Cabela's games, but those were hardly the only ones. There were a whole lot of them, and they were mostly bad, but more importantly, they were raking in money. Big money. And for a little while, they were a big business. So it kind of makes sense that a developer with a more established brand would want to try a hunting game spin-off with it, right? I don't know why they settled on Duke Nukem, but that's what happened. Sounds like a joke, but it was not a joke. It was way too real. Developer Action Forms actually tried to make a Duke Nukem hunting game. The prototype is actually out there. You can play it, and it is as bad as it sounds. Do I really need to say why this is a bad idea? Duke Nukem 3D was a game about exploring complex and interesting levels, not empty, featureless forests. Someone obviously realized it was a bad idea because it did get canceled. To add a bow to this bizarre story, elements of Duke Nukem Endangered Species actually eventually found their way into the equally insane Vivisector Beast Within, which, if you've never heard of, look it up. It's totally nuts. And number 3 is Gamer Girl. I guess was probably well-intentioned, but was misguided. A 2020 trailer went online for an FMV game called Gamer Girl, where you apparently play as a moderator for an online streamer who helps them deal with an online predator. It's one of those ripped from the headlines premises that sounds provocative, but mostly just comes off as trashy. The initial trailer got so much backlash that the publisher pulled the entire announcement after a single day, and it's been gone. The game just doesn't exist now. They did have to know that just the premise alone would create some pushback, and they're probably relying on it to generate a little bit of media interest. But the weird thing is not that it's a female streamer, it's that you play as the moderator, and you basically tell the streamer what to do, even about important life decisions, which is, I mean, a baffling idea to me. The whole thing would have made a lot more sense if you played as the central character, but instead they made it super weird. These days, everything is just a new battlefield for culture wars. Not my favorite thing in the world, but I think in this case, we can just say the entire premise of Gamer Girl, culture wars or not, was a bad idea and move on. And number 2 is Escape from Diab, which can be described simply as skinny guy has to escape from a city of evil fat people. Oh, this is another one to add to the hopelessly misguided category. This game was built with at least the potentially honorable goal of curbing childhood obesity, but if you can't tell by the fact I can barely not laugh while describing it, they did it in the most ham-handed way possible. I wasn't joking. This is a game where a selection of conventionally attractive, muscular, skinny guys have to escape from a city full of evil fat people. That's literally all there is. And while it's supposed to be about promoting healthy eating and lifestyle choices, from the screenshots, it mostly just seems like it's sort of demonizing fat people, which is kind of just a sucky thing to do. Obviously, being overweight isn't good for your health, but I don't know about making a moral judgment because of somebody's weight, let alone making them into an evil horde. Like, that feels ridiculous to even say. It sounds so silly. That's the premise of this game, though. I think it's trying to scare kids, quote unquote, straight, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do that, and this game is so obviously on the wrong side of that scale. Like, this is dumb. But what might surprise you is it's actually a game that was developed by a developer that specifically works in what are called games for health. They received funding from the government to make Escape from Diab and another game called Nanoswarm Invasion for Inner Space that I knew nothing about. And Escape from Diab has undergone extensive clinical trials to see if it helps children lose weight. Escape from Diab. Diab, like the first 4 letters of diabetes. That is something that the U.S. National Institute of Health gave them $10 million to develop. And finally, at number 1, it's a Shenmue online MMORPG because that makes sense. The Shenmue games, they're famous for a lot of things, but the last thing I think anybody wanted or expected was an MMO based on it. The first Shenmue games are focused on story almost above anything else. People are pretty invested in the story of Ryu in his quest for revenge against Lan Di. And Shenmue 3, it didn't quite satisfy, but maybe Shenmue 4 will. Anyway, when this game was announced, people did not want a vaguely related MMO filled with supernatural elements that weren't present in the main games. They wanted a proper sequel that continued the story. Just about everything that makes the series interesting and memorable would have been discarded when turned into an MMO. Maybe some of the environmental exploration would have remained, but everything else looks completely different. Like, was Shenmue even a popular enough brand to turn into an MMO? Yeah, it was primarily meant for Chinese and Korean markets, where it would probably be more popular, but still, it looks like they took the name and discarded pretty much everything else. There's a few screens of the game still floating around, but they pretty much look like every other generic Korean MMO that you've ever heard of. So, a quick bonus for you, KINECT Star Wars. We couldn't not mention this one, but we decided to throw it into bonus because the game has been the internet's punching bag for many, many years, and everybody knows how bad of an idea it was. Everybody said everything there is to say, but it cannot be understated how bizarre this whole thing is. I mean, seriously, Galactic Dance-Off? Did we really need to see Han Solo dancing to YMCA? Don't get me wrong, we had our laughs, but the song remixes are cringy to the extreme. The dancing is embarrassing, and everything about this mode just plain sucks. And nothing else needs to be said. Just look at it. It's the dumbest thing ever made. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero. And we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.